Okay.
Okay, I'll call the City Council work session of April 17th, 2020 to order at 12 p.m. noon. And can we have a roll call, please?
Mayor Copeland,
Here?
Tom Baylor,
Here.
Kathy Sherman,
Here.
Jeff Guard,
Here.
Melina Meyer,
Here.
Ann Schaefer,
Here.
David Allison,
Here.
David Gleason.
I'm here.
That's a quorum.
Okay, thank you. So today's work session topic is City Council training with the incident management team. And before we start that presentation, is that?
I would just let them know who's in the room.
Yeah, we have your incident team, incident commander actually, Paul Trumbley, deputy incident commander Mike Hicks. We have the clerk manning the recording and deputy clerk running the YouTube site for us. It's audio today, no video, just audio. We have city manager Helen Howarth, city councilman Tom Baylor, and myself, Mayor Copeland, are here in the room. And we had a roll call of those online. I also just wanted to let the share a couple things with council before we go to the incident commander. I did reach out to the tribal council and executive director of the native village of EAC and encourage them to listen in today so they could get some insight into how the incident management structure works and hear what your incident commander has to share with you today. And also, I've been working with our new public relations staff to improve my messaging and consistency. And there have been a couple little trip ups this week. Alaska Daily News published an article, and I will say that some of the reporters are very good in terms of being very careful with the quotes, and if you qualify a statement, they will use the qualifier instead of the statement. Others are intentionally trying to lead you into inflammatory statements because that makes for good press. So anyway, in ADN, we talked about closing the airport and closing fisheries, and I just wanted to assure council that that is not A, within our authority, and B, is not our goal at all. So I clarified that on our daily talk show today. And then also you get copies of the incident command minutes, and that's somewhat of a sausage making process there, and council wanted insight into that, but I just wanted to clarify, and I'm a manager myself and work with the board of directors, so I'm always very sensitive to the relationship between governance and management, between operations and policy. And there's places where it's absolutely appropriate to reach into each of those. I think Holly gave a great answer to Councilman Baylor's question the other day about the public driving policy, because ultimately they absolutely do. They drive it through council. But most times in a day-to-day, workaday world, it's council staff that brings you policy and makes recommendations for policy changes, and then listens to council and makes sure that they're interpreting and administering those policies in a way that meets council's policy goals for the community. So when I make a comment in the minutes that I disagreed with a statement, what I'm really saying is there's another half to that, which is there are times when it's appropriate to reach in both directions, but then the day-to-day policy generally comes from staff. So just wanted to make a couple of those clarifications, and it's really a pleasure to work with our new public relations staff, and I think it'll really help us going forward, especially as this new website moves towards launch. So I might just go ahead and cycle through council before we start in case you have any questions or expectations, and then we can turn it over to your incident commander. So for any questions or comments or what you'd like to see in the presentation today, Councilman Sherman?
Not at this time, thanks.
Councilman Guard?
I've got nothing at this time. I just need to do some learning.
Okay. Councilman Meyer?
I don't have anything right now.
Councilman Schaefer?
No, not right off the bat.
Councilman Allison?
Thank you, no.
Councilman Gleason?
Yeah, I got nothing.
Councilman Baylor?
Yeah, and you'll probably address it. I see there's in your boxes here in your command staff, there's a person with more than one box, and I'm sure you'll address that, but just a heads up. Just load management, I was just curious. Thank you.
Okay, so with that, the floor is yours, Paul.
All right, thank you guys for being here and listening in. I think this is going to be a very good segue into the meetings moving forward when you're talking about bringing in NVE as a governing body to co-op with the city council. There's a couple things that we want to specify. I'm just going to talk about the goals and objectives versus tactics real quick. And then they have to be smart elements of those objectives when we're creating them. Mike Hicks will talk about the roles, I think kind of define a little bit more on what council's roles are. So basically the council, your role in this incident is to create a goal. Let's say hypothetically speaking, your goal is to build a house. Then you hire a general contractor to come up with those objectives. Once those objectives are written and they're smart objectives, then he hires individual people to do the tactics. And I think that's where we're sitting at right now. Council's role is to build a goal. The incident command team or the incident commander writes the objectives, and they're smart objectives. They're specific, measurable, obtainable, relevant, and time-bound. Then I turn it over to my team to actually build that house. Do you have any questions?
Council, I'll go ahead and cycle through these when we have pauses. Councilman Schaefer?
Nope, not right now.
Sherman?
No, thank you.
Meyer?
Nope.
Allison?
No, thank you.
Guard?
Not at this time.
Gleason?
Nothing.
Baylor?
Not at this time.
Okay, so moving forward, when we're talking about the objectives versus tactics, at the council level, when you start to hear public comments and you start to bring that into your organization, you need to step back and stop the tactical portion of that in this group and just keep on building your goals. And I think Mike can explain it a little bit more as to the policymakers group on this whole situation. Go ahead, Mike.
Okay. I think everybody in the room at least has the latest command structure. It's our 207 organization chart. And it changes almost every day. Excuse me. Excuse me. Not major changes, but there are changes. Holly kind of misspoke the other day when she was talking about that we have a unified command. She stated that Paul and Helen were the unified commanders, and that was kind of an incorrect statement. If you look in our emergency op plan, it has the city manager or her designee is the incident commander. And again, I'm a couple weeks behind on this whole thing, but when this thing started to unfold, Helen chose, due to her training and lack of training, that she didn't want to be the incident commander and chose Paul to be the incident commander. So she stepped out of that role. So right now, we have an incident command. We do not have a unified command. So Paul is, if you look at the chart, he's the incident commander, and I'm the deputy incident commander. He has the ultimate authority for the incident. He has the final say in any decision we make. Let's say we have an earthquake and the canneries over here is collapsed and there's people trapped inside. And at the same time, the school is on fire and unoccupied. He has to make the decision of whether to put the fire out or save the people in the cannery. Our first and most important thing is life safety. Second is incident stabilization, and third is property management. So in that case, in that scenario, if he's a good incident commander, he's going to say, let the school burn down. We got people over here trapped in this cannery, they're dying. But that's his choice to make. Win, lose, or draw, that's his ultimate decision. Hopefully he takes good input from the folks that work around him and makes the right decision. Sometimes no decision's the right decision. But that's his job. He has the ultimate say for the final decision that the incident management team makes. If you look off to the side, we have Heather Brandon as our emergency management coordinator. She puts in inputs to the command staff. The top portion of this is the command staff, and then the lower portion is the general staff. So we also have right now 3 medical advisors, Dr. Sanders, Blackadar, and Yutzi. We don't have a safety officer yet. One of our bigger problems, I should say, with this is finding the manpower to fill all the blocks. And you need to fill these blocks with qualified people. You just can't stick anybody in these positions. Public information, we have Kathy Renfelt and Kathy Sherman right now, and a lady named, what's that lady's name that you hired?
Heidi.
Heidi. Okay, she's not plugged in there yet, but she's going to help out with PIO. And then below that, you have the general staff, which is your operations section, planning section, logistics, and finance. And they each have a section chief, as you can see on the chart. And then below them, on the other slides, there's other things. But if you look off to the right, you'll see the policy group. City council, the city manager is over there now, and the mayor is over there now. He was formerly in PIO. He still assists with PIO duties. And the legal counsel, Holly Wells, is attached to you guys and gals. You're just out there, you're a separate group from the incident management team. You're the policy group, and as Paul said, your job is to make policy and set goals, and our job is to create objectives and carry those out to get the end result hopefully everybody wants. So if you go to the second page, it breaks it down a little further. Here's the operations section, and we have span and control. One person can only control realistically 5 to 7 people. That's why this is broken down. So if you look, there's more than 5 to 7 people under, but he has 5 groups. He's got the information branch, fire and EMS branch, harbor branch, law enforcement, and ports and entry. Each one of those has a supervisor or leader. So now he's, instead of taking charge of 10 or 11 people, he's taking charge over 5. Ultimately, he has charge of all those, but you have supervisors in between that take some of the burden off that one person. And so, under fire and EMS, we have the fire division and EMS division and the morgue group. They'll also all have people that run those that report to the EMS branch supervisor. And then, some of the other folks don't have anything yet, but they eventually, this whole thing can expand or retract as much as we need it. Next page is the planning section. You can see right now he only has 4 people underneath him, working underneath him. Actually 3, there's nobody in the demobilization unit. The demobilization unit is on there because whenever you have an incident, you start considering demobilization at the beginning of the incident, not the end of the incident. You start planning now for winding down, putting the toys away, sending people home, doing whatever you need to do. You want to start that early on in the incident. We haven't started that yet because of our lack of people, but at some point, we have to consider that. That's why it's on the chart, so it doesn't get forgotten. Next page, you have the logistics section. They're the folks that get us the stuff we need. They get us the lumber to build the house, and so on. So in this case, we have a communications unit, facilities unit, sheltering unit, food unit, medical unit, and supply unit, and transportation unit. So Cindy Appleton's the logistics chief. So those folks under her, she asks them to get things, they get things, they give it to her, and then she makes sure it goes where it needs to go. So that pretty much explains the org chart. Questions? Any questions on that?
I just want to clarify one thing. What Chief Hicks spoke to a moment ago is that our plan does provide for a unified command, but basically we're designating the incident operations to Paul, and that I'm retaining the role as executive director, if you will, or the equivalent of. And that is in code and it's in the plan. But the incident command is definitely with Paul, and he will run all operations in conjunction with Mike Hicks. So I just want to be clear of that, is that our plan does allow for that unified piece.
Well, yeah, you still hold your role as a city manager and all your duties and as a supervisor and whatnot, but the unified command doesn't really start until we bring in other entities.
Right.
Like if later we decide to, like right now, the state unified command, they have law enforcement, they have medical, and they have Homeland Security are the 3 unified commanders. But you still, even when you go to that, one person is the head person, and they have they're the ones that make the final decision. So that's what you know, we're talking apples and oranges here. That's what we mean by unified command under ICS.
Yeah. And just before we go to council questions, I'll just add, because it took me a while to understand this structure as well. So in day-to-day operations, council would be at the, excuse me, top of the org chart. Your city manager reports to and works for you. The mayor facilitates council's will. But in an emergency, in an incident, that structure completely changes. And past councils have put this all in code that define those roles, where you hand the executive authority to your city manager, and the city manager has that authority, and frankly, she has powers that actually supersede council's powers in terms of making rules to manage the emergency, that give her emergency spending authority and basically the freedom to do what she needs to do. And so I just wanted to mention that before we go to questions. And I may take a call real quick from the governor's office and pass the mic to Helen for a minute. But Councilman Schaefer. This is.
Yeah, I've got just a couple questions. So looking at this chart, as you said, some of the boxes are empty just because they're placeholders right now, like we haven't started the demobilization process. But then looking at, like, for example, the safety officer box is still empty, and I was wondering if there are plans on filling that in. We have a lot of law enforcement in town between, you know, Forest Service, state, and our local city police. So it seems like we would be able to find people for that role.
There are certain qualifications you have to have for that role. It's under the command structure. Sometimes we can't find somebody that has all of them. We try to find the best person for that. And agreed, there's federal and state resources, law enforcement resources, but unfortunately they work for a different boss. They don't work for the city. We could ask them for assistance, but they're realistically probably not going to provide that in this case, because they have their own set of rules they have to follow. So Mr. Groff, Dick Groff, is usually our safety officer, but we haven't included him on this incident because he's one of our more vulnerable population, and we're trying to keep him from getting exposed as much as possible. I'm also certified as a safety officer, but I've got enough other duties. And right now we're in a really, we have a lot of moving parts, but not the moving parts that are going to hurt anybody. So if we get out there and we start having to move heavy equipment around, or there's a lot of potential for, you know, like during snowpocalypse would be an example. We had all these people out there shoveling off roofs, so there's a danger that somebody can fall off a roof, and a few of them did actually. So the safety officer oversees that operation to know how many people he's got, where they're at, and what they're doing, and has the authority to stop the operation at any time. So we are actively looking for somebody to fill that, but that's one that we want to make sure we got the right qualified person in there. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. And then I just had one other question, just wondering how you foresee incorporating NVE into the organizational structure, if you've made any progress on that.
We've got a meeting with them Monday at 1, I believe, or 1, and I know Helen's been working with them on some legal issues to make everything kind of fit, and basically we're going to sit down with them and you know, like I know there's some people over there that have some ICS training. That hopefully we can get that person on board and plug them into a role with our organization. We may, you know, depending on how involved they get, assign one of their folks as a liaison officer, which is just below the safety officer, and that would be a joint liaison officer with Heather Brannon. they would be the go-between between the city and NVE. They have finance folks over there, let's say, and right now we have Ken Fay and Barb Weber are our two finance folks. Well, as this thing grows, we may need 2 or 3 other people to help in the finance department. So we might be able to tap that resource and say, hey, can you send us some folks to assist our finance folks? And then we would plug them into these spots along the way. So that's kind of one way, you know, and we just got to kind of play it by ear at this point, because we have to find out what resources they can provide for us and what they're willing to provide for us. And then we go from there to include them. Like right now we have folks out on the second page that are greeting people at the airport. You know, they may want to help out with that, or the harbor. Right now we don't have people assigned to the harbor. That's our next, in that area, that's our next priority. The ferry group, right now we don't have a ferry until July 1st, so that's not a priority. So we kind of prioritize things as we go, and sometimes it's based on person power and objectives. And the objectives, even though you have maybe 1 through 8, tomorrow 8 could be number 1 and 1 could be number 4. They move around depending on how the situation unfolds. And once things get moving, it can become very fluid.
Does that answer your question, Vice Mayor Meyer? Councilman Schaefer, sorry. Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And Vice Mayor Meyer, you had a question?
I did. Let me switch over here. Thank you for sending us this updated command structure. It really helps. I have been, since this started, kind of looked over the Cordova Emergency Operations Plan and just kind of looked over it again last night. And I see that those boxes kind of match up to what you guys have, and then we're expanded down. One question that I had, since we're kind of talking about policy group off to the side there, is in the Cordova Emergency Operations Plan, I saw there was a medical advisor position that was supposed to be in the box for policy section. I was wondering if that was removed for any specific reason or overlooked, or how you guys see that a medical advisor would fit into the policy group.
That kind of goes back and forth. And in this case, right now, we're this scenario or this incident is right now it's a true medical incident. It has other components to it, but we're focused on the medical aspect of it. So that's why we have the 3 medical advisors connected directly to the incident commander for direct input. But they also, we can move them around and we can say, you know, okay, Dr. Sanders, we need you to go confer with the policy group because you're supposed to be in there. But right now, we're fortunate to have 3 doctors on board on this chart, but it moves around. So we can send those doctors where we need them. We can move people around as necessary. But right now, we're trying to get all the advice we can directly to the command post so we can make our decisions and then flow back up over to the policy group. Does that make sense?
I have a quick question to clarify that.
Councilman Baylor.
So I think, Mike, what you're saying is if the city council requests some advice from the medical group, that they would be available to us.
Absolutely.
Okay. I think that's what the question really is.
Yeah, you can't cover all the little boxes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Does that make sense, Councilman Meyer?
Yeah, it does. I was just looking at the Cordova Emergency Plan, and I saw medical advisor and the medical branch kind of in both boxes. So I thought it would be helpful maybe just to add it into the policy group too, even if they are overlapping, because this is such a medical-centered emergency. I think it would be nice to have to know the role that the medical advisor is part of a policy group. That was just my kind of understanding when I looked at it, but kind of goes both ways, so I don't want to nitpick it or anything.
Sure, no, I understand. And the plan is just that. It's a plan. It's a guide. We try to use it. Sometimes we don't use everything in the plan. Sometimes we change it up a little bit, but it's kind of something to make us go on down the right track. And but that's a good point. And that's something we could potentially add into that policy group. It's a good observation, and we'll look at that.
Can I ask a quick question, please?
Yes, please, Councilman Guard.
Okay. I understand that our position of policy, not actions or that, and I have no issues with any of that. But where the policy group is kind of off in a box up by itself, I really can't see exactly where and how we're supposed to plug in with this thing. So can somebody clarify that for me a little bit?
If you look in the emergency plan, it's structured the same way. The policy group is kind of off to the side. It's just on this particular chart, it was a good place to put it, to be honest with you. It fit in there. But again, as Paul said, you guys are there to come up with your goals, and we're here to support you. It's a two-way street. You support us when we need something, and we support you. But that separation is so that we don't try to dictate what you do, and you don't try to dictate what we do. It's just it's a separation that's there for that reason, that shows that there's a separation. But we still are on the same team, and it's kind of a give and take scenario. Does that kind of answer your question?
No, I've got no issues with the separation or anything like that. I want this all to work the best it can, but this just doesn't tell me how best where to do this, and it may be trying to split hairs or whatever, but is it through Helen, or do we have the mayor into the incident commander, or does it come in someplace down below and then back up? I mean, what's going to work best so we get the best function out of all this? I just don't know.
This is Helen. In the incident command structure, the policy group is really a critical piece of it. It's the one that sets direction, that says we want to protect Cordova, we need to have this, we need to have that. And as Paul was mentioning, the incident command team needs direction from council that says, this is what we want to do. And so council, in the past few weeks, has been saying we really want to make more restrictions on our points of entry. These small community exemptions allows us to do that. You asked me and Holly, our attorney, to develop ordinances and other directives that would then be sent to the incident command to make it happen. So those are the kinds of directives that council has to do and should do and needs to do to help guide the incident command team. So I think you guys have shared very clearly that you want safe harbors. You want to make sure that vessels aren't coming in and basically anyone can run around town. So we developed the mutual aid agreements, and we're developing a harbor plan. And so all of that is being driven from your direction that said we need something to happen around harbors, or we need something to happen around airports, or we need something to happen. I've heard people talk about how the community itself is engaging. You know, we passed an ordinance that said you must maintain social distance. I heard pretty clearly from some of you that you would like to have a face covering rule, which is something that Incident Command is able to work on, and me as city manager under the emergency order is actually able to implement without council approval or, you know, ordinance. We can just put down an emergency rule that says you guys in our community, everyone needs to have face coverings. So those are the kinds of things that really provide guidance and have to date. You guys have been very clear about things you felt were important for our community, and the incident command team has been running with that.
Just so we're clear, I'm not trying to figure out how to have, for council to have a position of authority in this. That's not it at all. I know that we may have overstepped into tactics or implementation earlier. a lot of this is because just everybody didn't know what we were supposed to be doing. But all I'm asking is the most productive way to do it. And maybe the best way is for council to go through Helen, the manager, or something, to interject there. But I don't want to make way for trouble for the incident commander. I don't want to make things less smooth. I don't want to micromanage. I don't want to do any of that. I just was wondering where our input point was. And it may have been a dumb question, or we're trying to just to have a line going across someplace.
No dumb,
So,
no
I
question.
think-
No question's a dumb question. They're all good questions. That's why we're all here. We're all here to learn. But let me simplify it down a little bit further. Normal day-to-day operations. Council has their council meeting. They vote on stuff. They make decisions. They do stuff day-to-day on a regular basis. And whenever something needs to be done by staff, you guys refer it to the city manager, and the city manager refers it to staff. So in this case here, the incident management team is your staff, outside of the normal day-to-day city structure. The normal day-to-day, the council would pass something to the manager would pass it to staff and come back and report back to council. So in this case, your incident management team is your staff. So if you just do your normal routine, basically, you guys and gals make your decisions and pass them to Helen. Helen passes it to the incident management team. Does that make sense?
I got to pass it to Helen, and she passes it to you, and that's the only line I was looking for in there.
Oh, okay.
Interface.
Okay.
Okay, there's a little more, but that I'll add in a minute. But Councilman Baylor.
Yeah, Mike, I'd like to refer to your organizational chart you have for the pandemic influenza. It's in our emergency operation plan.
Okay, I don't have it from me. He's got a copy of it.
Okay. So while these, under who is responsible, it has all these acronyms, but all entities, I would assume that's council included. And then is POL, is that policy?
Where's, what page you on?
You can start with page 175.
This is on the city website.
Hopefully, I got older books, so I hope we're matching up.
Okay.
So under 175, it's position checklist, command and control and management.
No.
I think it's 187 and on.
Yeah, this is an old one.
They're on 193? Yeah, there's that.
And for those listening on council, I've got a 2010, so what you're seeing on the web may not match up exactly.
Okay, where are you going specifically?
Well, okay, so this is command and control and management.
Okay.
All right, so then your second line down, develop, update plans for operating procedures for responders, coordinate all plans and operating procedures with those and other city emergency services. It says all entities, so I think this has already been done, but I think this is where council's sitting back is like, what was our role and responsibility? So according to this, we were to maybe not develop, but be brought into that and brought up to date. And then if you go down, and I'm just gonna, there's a bunch of these, so I think this will help answer some questions. Down below there, it says meet with local stakeholders, review major elements of this plan, you know, and I think we're on that direction, right, with meeting with NVE and,
Yeah, you know, the stakeholders are like the fishermen, CDFU,
NVE.
right,
you know, Forest Service, the Coast Guard, you know, NVE, you know, AC Company, Nichols, all the stakeholders.
right.
That's everybody in the community.
So that's the role of, and according to this, that's part of the role of council, to be involved in that.
Right, and all entities, they're referring to this page, the previous page. All entities have some responsibility, and not necessarily in all cases.
Well, I'm going by what's written is, okay.
Right, but
So
not
under-
necessarily like, okay, if we have a house fire,
Right,
the only part of this incident command structure we set up is the incident commander on scene. Doesn't go any higher, never any lower. Council has no say, nobody else has any say in how that fire operation is run.
well, I guess I'm sticking with the fact that this was laid out for a pandemic.
Right,
So.
so I'm just
assuming-
trying to say for a pandemic, let's say, I'm trying to simplify it.
Yeah.
Okay, for like say a pandemic, maybe for a pandemic, let's see, let me do a list here.
Well, let me run through a couple more of these, Mike, and that might
For
help.
pandemic, maybe the Red Cross volunteers wouldn't be involved
Yeah.
necessarily to begin with. They may later, but we don't necessarily involve all these people at the beginning of the incident. I think that's what,
I think I'm just looking at council's involvement.
Right.
When so, and then under community disease control,
yep,
okay, so as we go down there, I don't have numbers here, but, so prepare to screen, quarantine at points of entry, follow CDC guidelines. So that has the IMT and policy group.
I don't see it. Let's read that again.
Prepare to screen / quarantine at points of entry, follow CDC guidelines.
Okay,
So, and I'm just saying, I think this is where the confusion comes in, because according to this, we probably should have been up to date, and part of that, again, I don't think we want to plan, but part of that, what's going on. And then the other one is, the next one, prepare to implement protocols for managing ill passengers at ports of entry, you know. Down further, review plans for quarantine as appropriate, and then review plans for isolation, essential function personnel, see the plan. So we're kind of involved in a way of that, as far as, it almost tells me that we should be looking at these plans as you guys develop them, is what I guess I'm
in
getting at.
some cases, now, again, this was, this started, I was out of town when it started, not that that's an excuse.
Right.
So things were set into play before, a lot of times, we put the cart before the horse.
Yeah, and I'm not
like,
criticizing here, I'm just.
No, and I'm not trying to pick it apart either. We had some volunteers that were volunteering just on their own to go out to the airport and do these things. Well, the policy group had no say, we had no say, they just did it. So we found out about it and we said, okay, we can use the help. We want you under our umbrella, and we got them, now we're slowly moving for a structure to get them in the system. We took care of that on our own without having to involve you folks. Now, later down the road, if we want to restrict people's movements coming into the airport, like some airports are doing around the state, and I have a question into the state about that, we could, this is hypothetical, we could say that anybody who comes into the airport has to sign this piece of paper with all their information before they leave security. I was told today that's what they're doing in Anchorage. That's for you guys to come up with that policy between you, Helen, the legal folks, to see if we can or can't do that, and then pass it to us. So it's a two-way street. It flows back and forth. Sometimes you don't have to be involved.
Well,
And
I think.
I'm just going to add, oh, go ahead.
So I think that was a good example as the airport, where the community helped drive policy, because they saw a hole, they filled that hole, then it got brought to the attention of council. And if I read this right, council probably should have called a meeting, got with you guys, say, are you aware of this? This is a policy we would like you to implement, and then you guys go implement. So I think that was the lack of, just inexperience for council and everything. But that's what I'm getting at when the question is, what is council's role? That right there is a really good example of there was a gap. We probably should have met, had a discussion with you guys. You're aware of it. How are you going to fill that? And then we step back and you implement the policy.
Exactly.
And I can also say that the way things are set up is that when things come to our attention, that you don't even have to direct. Because in fact, at the airport, it may have been that we had something in play and had different ideas about how it was going to go. And I think ultimately, I would like Incident Command to come to us, come to me as city manager, come to you as council and say, you can say, hey, we have an issue at the airport, and they can put a plan together and come to us and say, this is what we are going to do. So I think we need to be careful that we don't go into the weeds, if you will, and say, hey, you guys need to get somebody out at the airport in a tent with whatever, but say, hey, we need to control our port of entry, council policy. We need to be real clear about who's allowed into town, council policy. Incident command team, go make it so. Come to us with your recommendations. And if you need legal authority somehow, we, council, will be able to provide that. We'll have an ordinance. We'll have this to allow you to do what you're requesting. So I think we're all saying the same thing, but I just want to be sure that that we all know that there was never a hole in the airport direction. It just hadn't been accomplished yet. I know these guys were working on it very hard to try to figure out.
Well, and that's the other side of the coin. Okay, we saw a problem as the management team that these folks were operating outside our umbrella, brought them into the group. Now, at some point, we may have to hire an outside security firm to do that job. That's when it flows the other way and say, hey, we need money. You guys, we need you to, here, we came up with a plan. We need $20,000 to fund somebody to stand at the airport for 6 weeks to make this happen once we've vetted it through the legal system and all that other stuff. So that it would flow the other way then.
I don't know if you all have the objectives that I sent out. If you look at the top portion above public safety,
Yeah, Susan emailed those out for those online to
I just want
council.
to make sure it's the objectives to ensure health and safety of the community and promote economic stability. This was the objectives that came out
Oh, yeah.
the first week of our emergency operations. That was 6 weeks ago. And if you read down just above where it says public safety bold, the bottom objective, outreach to Cordova ports of entry to include Harbor, Alaska Marine Highway, Cordova airports, pre-plan policies and procedures to include awareness, possible delays or closures. And that was more specifically towards the planning and the PIO portion of our team. That wasn't implemented, but that was an objective 6 weeks ago. So that was just something that we were planning on working towards. But as the mandates came out faster than we could implement, it really overwhelmed our team with the huge community response to absolutely close everything down. So this was a plan 7 weeks ago. Well, we're going on 7 weeks. This is week 6. And so just if you look through the objectives, there are things that were going to be in place. We just became so overwhelmed. Council became so overwhelmed. And that was driving tactics versus coming up with goals and objectives. So do you see where that kind of played into this? And that's why we've been we haven't been like not doing anything the last couple weeks, but it really slowed us down for a couple weeks. And we're going into week 3 because we're at the council level, we're trying to deal with tactics instead of just a goal. Does that make more sense?
Yeah, and it almost gets to my point that you had this 6 weeks ago, but on your command and controls, develop update plans and operating and share those with us. And again, I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying moving forward, I think we've got this understanding is we're going to be up to date, and I think, that's all I'm saying. I'm not criticizing what's done is done.
And I'd just like to add this organization chart. I've been working on this, trying to get this better. We had a really small, hard to read one. So this is part of that. Eventually, hopefully this weekend, I've been working on this tirelessly, but we copied it after someone else's. Included with this, once we get it up to speed, will be our objectives, what our priority of those objectives are, what our current situation is, and some other information. Those will all be in one handy document so that it'll go out for right now our operational period is 7 days. So that'll be our operational period plan for 7 days, and you guys will all get a copy of that once we get, I'm working toward that goal, and that fits into what you were saying. It'll get us all on the same page. Because right now you're in the dark about some stuff, we're in the dark about some stuff, we're really in the dark about some stuff out there, and we're just trying to reel it all in and get it all together. So this is gonna hopefully improve here real soon.
It will.
So council, I'm going to continue, I'm going to go on through for questions and comments, but I did want to interject a couple things at this point because to just add to this. One is that that current plan that Councilman Baylor is referring to is on the city's website. If you go to the city's homepage, cityofcordova.net, and then click on the COVID-19 banner at the top, that takes you to the current COVID-19 page. In the lower right-hand corner, there's a box off to the right-hand side that says Emergency Operation Plan. And if you go down and look at Emergency Operation Plan 2014 to 2019, it has that latest plan that Councilman Baylor is referring to. And as he shows, the plan for pandemic response shows policy involvement early on in some of these steps. So for a variety of reasons, that didn't happen at the outset, but that's kind of where we're at now, where we have a weekly policy meeting scheduled. The council is getting current information, and in fact, there's whole new frequently asked questions that I just came through a few minutes ago that I just forwarded to Susan to pass on to council. So, but what Helen said, I think it needs to be repeated so you understand, to help council understand what you're actually, you have more power and flexibility. So when you declared an emergency, you gave Helen emergency powers so that she can be your secret weapon. She's your secret agent now. You don't have to you don't have to write an ordinance every time you want something to happen. That's what the code, why it has this incident command. So you don't have to worry about how to word a mask ordinance or something. You literally just direct Helen to do it, and she goes and gets with Holly, and within a couple of days, she has a mask ordinance that the team can enforce, that they can implement, that protects the community, that can meet the objective, protect public health. But now she's your secret weapon. So she's not, she isn't taking over the council's power, she's executing your power. And then on the governance side, I mentioned because you're still the city council, and this emergency response is still under your umbrella as governance for the community. So I made a comment in the incident management team meeting yesterday that I was asked to repeat, and it's one of the appropriate areas when council, it's not only your right, but probably your responsibility to reach down into the operations level. And that's, it isn't council's responsibility to, and this is from my Alaska Municipal League training, it's not the council's responsibility to manage, but it is the council's responsibility to see that things are properly managed. So when council, and I think the council did that this week in particular, they said, hey, we're not getting communications we need. We're not getting the public's not getting the communications. If they'd actually referred to the plan, they would see that that's one of the plan elements. So that's a role too as policymakers to say, hey, we're not seeing this plan being implemented. That starts the conversation with staff. They say, you're right. And in fact, in this case, the incident management team also realized that that's a current priority, but then it's formalized and you can say, hey, Helen, do what you need, get public relations staff, get this thing going, get us the communication so we can see that this plan's being executed and so that the community can see what the great work that we're doing. So I just wanted to add those and maybe help clarify. And then the last piece was to speak to Councilman Guard's question. What we didn't talk about is what council shouldn't be interjecting on the policy side, because we're all citizens, we all have our own skills and talents and whatnot. So if a councilman has some emergency management training and says, hey, this might be a good thing to do, or we're also citizens, but that's where you separate your policy input and push it through the portal to the team and say, hey, we see that the setup you have here, or the stores aren't implementing, or any tactical suggestion, still welcome those, but push those through the same, the new website and the portals that are available. And that just kind of separates your role as a councilman from your role as a citizen, and allow you to contribute in the same way that we're encouraging all of the community to contribute. Incident Commander Tremblay, and then I'll go back to you, Council, for questions.
Yeah, just to clarify too, that this process doesn't start under Annex L of the pandemic influenza. It doesn't start here. It starts on actually page 1 of the emergency operation plan. And so if you do actually read through it, it does kind of specify a little bit of things, and it also gives the powers to do certain things under a disaster and a declaration. So it's just not the Annex L that we're really working under. It's actually starting from page 1. Mr. Baylor, probably be a good idea to get an updated version of that. And the version was 2017. Yeah, page 7 on this was actually July 2017, and it does get updated periodically. You can see the last 3 city managers on there. But what this does for us, really, talking about this, is this allows us to implement another plan moving forward if we have a similar situation. So.
And then I think I heard you say, Paul, that policy guidance is important too. If the council, you know, if you're saying, we want you to control access to the airport and we want you to be conservative, you know, or you say, hey, but we want to, however, the policy can kind of signal, you know, it's like, we want a functional harbor this summer, but we want to protect life safety. And, you know, we want it to emphasize the life safety and rather than the other end.
Exactly.
Those kind of policy
The
signals.
policymakers are a very important role in this situation and all disasters, whether it's an earthquake or we get a tsunami or whatever. We've trained over the last 15 years on almost every different scenario we can find. What it's important to say is that this particular scenario, some of it was trained over the last 3 Alaska shields, but certain aspects of it, we can't really train on every little aspect and of the plan. So, you know, we just take little pieces and try and train ourselves in those. So,
Hey,
Just wanted to add one thing. I think I have gotten the idea from folks that there's a perception among some that those of us that are involved in these incidences are bringing our own personal views to this, to what happens. You know, we aren't pursuing things as hard as we can because we personally don't believe we should. And I want everyone to understand nothing could be farther from the truth. And that's where the direction from council comes in. I might personally disagree with the direction, but unless there's a legal reason not to pursue that direction, we will implement what the council wants to do. So the legal team is really important because they provide the cover, that's the wrong word, they provide the ability for us to do things legally without recourse from others who might choose to sue us. And so it's really, really, really important that our legal team be a critical part of that. And I just want to reassure everyone that, you know, Paul Trombley and Chief Hicks, we're not looking at any directive and saying, you know, we don't really like that, so we're not going to do it. That is not it at all. We will do what we're told to do in a legal way and in the most possible, in the best way possible. Now, it could be that some people say, let's do this, and we just don't have the resources to do it, and then we come to you, and if we still don't have the resources, we maybe put it on a back burner, but we're here to make sure that what council is asking for, what the community through council is asking for, so.
and that's correct. I'd like just to add on top of that is that the incident command structure is a paramilitary organization, and we do have rules and regulations that we have to follow. So, yeah, thank you for saying that.
Okay, Councilman Gleason, you had texted you're ready with a question, and we'll go to you and then to other councilmen.
All right, thanks, Clay. Yeah, I didn't know if we were just jumping in or going in order. First, I'd like to say, Helen, we have your back. You are a good city manager, and you have the city's interest at heart. I am 100% certain of that. I'm going to piggyback off of Councilwoman Schaefer on the enforcement. I was interested to hear Mike talking about Homeland Security being part of the state, and we do have a big Coast Guard boat. And I didn't know if we could incorporate a little box there with Homeland Security. I think, you know, nothing scares a fisherman more than a little orange boat with 3 Coast Guard guys in their Mustang suits and a clipboard and some guns. So if we could actually include them in harbor patrols or something, I don't even know if that's possible, but boy, they would really make people toe the line. So, you know, if people aren't wearing face masks or there's, you know, 4 or 5 guys in a boat cabin drinking beer or whatever, there, you know, the possibilities are there. So I didn't know if that was possible. It does seem like a really tall order for 3 police officers to be responsible for the whole town and a harbor that's going to be filling up. So that was my suggestion or question.
Yeah, we can ask them for assistance, but again, they work under a different umbrella. Like the current situation is if, for our local law enforcement, if we need backup, we have a serious call, barricaded suspect, active shooter, the troopers and the Forest Service officer will back us up, they'll respond. But they operate under their own set of rules, and it would be something we could bump up to the state and ask for that resource. There's a procedure we have to do that, and that's all we can do to ask. It's a good idea, and we can ask for that resource, and then they would bump it up to the federal level, because when we said Homeland Security, that was state Homeland Security. It's at the state EOC, not federal, two different departments. But it's something we could ask for. Whether they'll give it to us or not, we don't know, but we can ask. Doesn't hurt to ask.
Okay, thanks, Mike.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and maybe just do this a little informally. It might be a little more efficient than going through councilman by councilman, but is there another council question?
Yeah, Mayor, this is Allison.
Councilman Allison.
I don't have a question, just a comment and clarification, I guess. I understand the structure and everything. I just want to be clear that we're not giving policy direction at a council meeting directly to the incident management commander. We're not giving direction when we're not setting policy when we're discussing around the table, throwing out ideas and things like that. That's not setting policy. Policy is set by discussing something, coming to consensus. Whether we vote on it or not, really immaterial. But if we come to consensus with our manager, and then our manager can pass it on to the incident management team. But and for the manager, make sure that we're clear on what is policy. Just because one or two council members agree on it, it doesn't make it policy. I think maybe that was some of the confusion recently. I guess it's maybe a little bit different for an emergency situation like this with the management team than it is for general council business without an emergency going on or anything. I'm always in favor of two council members putting something on the agenda, but just that doesn't set policy just because it gets on the agenda. And maybe we need to object a little more on the emergency thing if a couple council members want to put something on the agenda and several of us don't think that's a good idea. Instead of wasting staff's time doing something, maybe we stop at that point in time in the emergency situation. But anyway, I just want to make sure that we're clear that our direction and policy setting comes through the policy team, council with the manager and the legal, and then that goes to the manager, and then the manager is then going to the management team. The management team shouldn't be taking their policy comments made at a council meeting or in the public for that matter. It needs to come through the policy team, directly through the management, or to the manager, to the incident commander. So anyway, that's my take on it. Anyway, I think council needs to be a little bit more clear on their policies, and for the management team, don't take that as policy just because we're discussing something.
Thank you, Councilman Allison. I see a lot of nodding around the table here, and that's a great thing about emergency. Council doesn't want to task your attorney with drafting an ordinance that we're only going to have in place for 6 or 8 months or something. Better to have her working directly with Helen to implementing, and the way these, yeah, exactly. So I think that's a good clarification. Additional council questions or comments?
Yeah, this is Melina.
Councilman Vice Mayor Meyer.
I have a question on how council with the opens meeting should give direction or input to the city manager? Is it, because I don't want to overwhelm her with phone calls or even a bunch of emails here and there. I do comment on some of them and send them her way, but it's hard to know when to contact her, when council can get together to discuss these items, because we do have the Open Meetings Act, and unless we get something on the agenda, then we, it's not really part of the agenda to talk about. So how should we move forward by council giving direction to the city manager and reach consensus?
Do you want to speak to that, Helen, or?
I guess it depends on the kinds of information. Obviously, under this incident, we're all getting overwhelmed with, I was in a 45-minute meeting earlier today, and when I got back, I had 45 new emails. So it is overwhelming, and it's hard to keep up with. I think that's where the Cordova Prepared website comes in, is that we're hoping that people will funnel their questions through that site, and again, hopeful, understanding that there's been a lack of the kind of communication that the community's looking for. We may resolve some of this, but I'm not answering your question very well, Melina, I'm sorry. But in general, if they're really specific to this COVID situation, we would love all the questions to go through the Cordova Prepared website. If there's something specific that would require an action of council, they can certainly come to me, and I will push it forward to council if we can, or through the incident command team. So there's no easy answer on this one. Did that answer your question? Not really, sort of, kind of? Yeah.
I did a little bit, but I guess the main part of my question was, how do council as a body, because we're not, just one of us or two of us telling you something isn't really council's will. So we need to tell you something as a consensus of our governing body. And how's the best way to do that? Is it our weekly meetings, or how do we move forward with doing that?
I think we've all agreed that we need to meet more regularly. And so if, I would think council, and Clay might have an answer to this, is maybe if there's enough of you that want something on the agenda, you guys set the agenda with Clay, and could make sure that was on there. I'm happy to answer any questions and pass the buck literally to the people who are knowledgeable and knows what's happening if you have specific questions. So as council, yeah, absolutely, that's what I'm there for.
Councilman Baylor had a question, but I'm going to also give an obscure partial answer. That's why I kicked this one over to Helen. So in our discussions with Holly, it is good to have a council action behind some of these things. So I think the mask ordinance, or a masking requirement, is a good example right now. The incident management team wants to do this. In our conversations with Holly, she says, if council action does this, then you're in really, really good legal footing. If afterwards someone says, hey, you stepped across the line on my personal constitutional rights, they say, well, your governance body under emergency declaration to protect public life and health directed your manager to do this. That puts us on good footing. So that's a partial answer, but Helen's answer is also correct. It depends. And so that's why these weekly meetings and communication are good. And of course, the ability of council to call an emergency meeting. But, and then the only other piece is, and that's the purpose of this training really, if it's a tactical suggestion, run it through the Cordova Prepared. We just got an update on the frequently asked questions. They're a great job of breaking it up by different, by the harbor, by the airport, and so forth. Those just are going out to get circulated to you, so you'll have some of those answers in your hands. As a lot of those tactical, if we keep pushing those through the website and not through Helen's phone, not only does she get the things she needs to get done quicker, but you'll actually get those tactical answers quicker, and they get folded into the incident management team's plans. They are not writing these whole plans. The community's writing these plans if that flows through the incident management team, where they can fit it into that structure, get the legal questions answered, and get it executed. Councilman Baylor?
You want to?
And just a reminder is that this new website that we're putting together will launch by Monday. I think will provide all those robust, not only communication, but interactions that people are looking for. It's a place to communicate. It's a place to learn. And it's a place of resources. So I'm hopeful that a lot of everyone's concerns will be alleviated through that website. It'll be a ready source of information anyway. But obviously, council staff works for you, and if you need anything at all, obviously, direct is certainly a way to get an immediate answer, and we're happy to be that resource for you guys.
And just to refer back to this operations section organization, if you look under ports of entry, right now the airport is the priority. But you see, we have a Cordova citizen who's special forces training. I mean, they understand the incident command structure. They've served active duty in wars. They're incredibly experienced and talented, and they understand the legal lines. They understand paramilitary, they understand logistics, and so that's a great resource that we can use. And then when you look at the airport group, the volunteer group have been pulled into that and are assigned. So now it's under the structure of the city, and that's the way it should work. And you'll see these other boxes getting filled as the incident management team focuses on their goals and objectives.
And the other thing you have to understand too, in all these positions, the folks that we have in these positions have various amounts of training and experience. Some have a lot of both, some have a little of some and a lot of other. So it's a mix, and we try to plug them in where we can. And then the more experienced folks, of course, will help the less experienced folks. So we got different, we've got a lot of very, very talented people. And everybody on this chart brings something to the table. Everybody in this room and on the phone brings something to the table. We all have really good ideas, and we're going to make mistakes, and we just need to make sure that we're working together and not standing toe-to-toe arguing about something that doesn't get anybody anywhere. But just understand that we have, some of these folks on this chart have never ever they've had the training, but they've never actually been involved in an event, and so they're learning as they go. And sometimes it's tough, and sometimes not everybody does real well, and they're not a good fit. But we try to coach them, we try to guide them along. I've been doing this for a little while, and I do okay at it, but I don't know everything. And Paul and I bounce ideas off each other all the time. So it's a good idea to bounce ideas off each other. And we understand your phone's blowing up from the community. Ours are too, and we understand the community's concerns. And hopefully, this new website that Helen put together will help that a lot, and we're moving toward that goal. And unfortunately, in this day and age where everybody expects everything to happen instantly, because we always have these smartphones in our hands, it's not going to happen that way. Sometimes we have to vet everything, like I said the other night, make sure we're putting out accurate information so that we don't have to go back and change that, and then it just follows everything up. So if we all work together, put our differences aside, we'll be fine.
I just want to add one thing to that, and I think this is what I learned is when I first started the job, folks were saying, oh, you got to do this training, you got to do this training around incident command. I had no idea even what that was, no idea. And so I put it off, and here I am now in the middle of the largest incident probably anyone will ever have to deal with in their lives, and I did not get that training. The incident command is not made up of people representing entities. It's made up of people with very specific skills and training. And that, I think, is critical. I did not fit in the incident command because not only did I not have the training, but I didn't have the skills, specific skills they were looking for. So my role is very different. It's supportive of the incident command team. It's supportive of council. It's making sure there's an interaction between the two. And it's making sure that the regulations, the ordinances, the rules that we are allowed to do under this emergency order are put in place so that everyone gets, that the response is appropriate. But yeah, I am not someone who should be on that incident command team because of my lack of experience or training, and that there's specific skill sets for specific jobs, and it's that sort of experiences that we need to fill those positions that are vacant.
I would say the same thing. I've been offered that training over and over, and I've had a little bit of training as a PIO to have to deliver scripted messages. That's completely different than this, where public education is our the greatest tool against this thing. So, that's why you saw me move out of the PIO role, and we put a ton of resources in there, including professionals, and move back over to the policy side, where communications with the governor's office and federally is important. So,
And it's the same with Helen. You folks are all more valuable to this incident in your normal duties and handling the stuff you normally have to handle. That takes a load off of us handling that. You're the perfect assets for where you're at, and that's why you're where you are.
Councilman Baylor?
Could you speak real quickly about the incident down at the harbor? I actually had a discussion with Paul. There was just some questions on, I think the next time you would secure that boat, the people would not be able to come off of it if they thought there was a case involved. I think that was a question we got over and over from the community, and I think you learned something from that, and you're going to handle it next time.
Yeah, we learned a lot from that. I mean, we had a lot of things in place. We trained, and we trained for a lot of different things, and just when you think you got everything covered, somebody throws you a curveball. And in that case, there it was a boat that had no intentions of coming here. They came here because they had an emergency. The folks that handled the emergency did everything they were supposed to do. They dressed up appropriately, donned their PPE the way they should, followed all those procedures. But the one thing that we missed initially was securing the boat. So after we found that out, as soon as we found that problem, we sent law enforcement down there to identify the folks on the boat and told them they had to stay on the boat. Eventually, the boat was moved to a safer part of the harbor away from everybody. And then later, sometime later, 4 or 5 hours later, the person that had the issue returned to the boat and they left. So we kind of quasi-quarantined them, but now we know that if we get a boat that comes in like that, that we need to get, and then going to be part of the harbor group just on a normal day-to-day basis. If we get a boat that comes in the harbor, somebody's going to go down there to find out who it is, what they're doing, and explain the rules to them. So that was something we learned that day. It had a good ending, and nobody got hurt, nobody got the virus, and yeah.
Thank you.
Council, questions, comments?
Mr. Mayor, this is Allison.
Councilman Allison.
Yeah, I'd just like to circle back to where we were 15 minutes ago with Councilmember Myers, or Vice Mayor Myers' question on discussing things. I think the attorney has counsel a little bit afraid of discussing anything. I think that the time for council to discuss, we obviously can't meet for coffee and have coffee with 3 or 4 of us and discuss things. So we have to do our discussions at the council table. And when we're there, I think that any time we're having discussions with our manager, whether during the manager's report or council comments or whenever that is in the meeting, where we can discuss anything that comes up that's legal to discuss. We can't make any decisions if it wasn't on the agenda, but we can certainly have that discussion and bring those things up and talk about things. And then if we decide that, yeah, we might want to set a policy or get that on the agenda so we can vote it up or down and find out what consensus is, then we're having enough meetings now where 24 hours later we can have another meeting and have it published on the agenda, and that's where we would make the decision. As long as we're not making any decisions on it, I believe that we can certainly have discussions on anything that comes up. So
Exactly.
I guess, back to Vice Mayor Myers' question, that's where, any meeting we can have a discussion with each other and the manager on any item that's legal to discuss, and as long as it's not an illegal item, we can certainly have that discussion. And as long as we don't make a decision on it, then we're still being legal. So
Absolutely.
My thoughts on it.
Well, and I think
So
it's
maybe a suggestion for all our meetings is a discussion item for council policy. or COVID council policy discussion. So we just have a placeholder on all of our meetings where if something does come up, we can just talk about it, and then it's on our agenda.
Okay.
I think this is Council Member Schaefer.
Yes, Councilman Schaefer.
I kind of think that's a good idea to have a space reserved at the meeting to talk about policy if we need to, because that's something that I've kind of struggled with, is finding the opportunity to have those kind of discussions where we talk about what our options are, what we're thinking about in terms of policy and actions that we want to take. So I think that's a good idea.
So why don't we, and I've kind of been struggling a little bit too. I think on the front end, you should have a manager's report and a mayor's report. So I can share, just had this conversation with the governor's office, and they're reaching out to the federal delegation. They wanted a count of how many vessels and people and stuff are here because they're making a federal request for test kits for Cordova. So that's all great news, but that something that council should be aware of as this is transpiring. And then we can add council comments at the end, because back to Councilman Allison's comment, and part of the goal here too is that we don't want to have to have the incident commander and deputy commander sitting here in these meetings every time. You've got Helen and I, and if Helen hears even one of you say, hey, boy, we should be looking at masks or thinking about masks, that's the opportunity for her to say, you know what, your incident team is actually and I'm working on that, and we plan on having that in place the next couple of days. Or this particular thing is something that has legal implications, and Holly's suggesting that that council take a vote on that particular one. So let's put it on the agenda for council action, and let's do that tomorrow or Monday or Wednesday or whatever. Does that help?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Okay, thank you, Councilman Schaefer. And Susan's taken notes on revising this agenda for our weekly meetings. Council.
Did I hear a consensus that we're having a policy discussion item on every agenda?
COVID policy discussion.
Yeah, COVID policy discussion on these weekly special agendas.
Okay, got it.
Maybe since we have a lot of eyes on our agendas too, maybe a little disclaimer on there, just like this is a discussion item, not an action item or something like that. I don't want to create panic when we have certain things, but we have to discuss them in the open. So,
yeah,
just a thought.
Got it.
Well, let's see. These are actually work sessions, right? So that can just be a consistent work session topic, council discussion of COVID items. Is that, Susan, you think, or?
Yes, but on Wednesdays, we're having special meetings.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. That's right. This is a Friday work session.
What day is it?
Exactly.
Straight, will you?
Okay. Council questions, suggestions, and your incident commander has a comment.
Yeah, so moving forward, I know you guys have a meeting on Monday. You should, no?
We can't.
No,
Cancel, so
we're
Wednesday.
moving it to Wednesday.
If you could come up with some goals for the incident management team to work on, because right now we're just kind of in a holding pattern and waiting for objectives to come through. And so, if you look at some of the objectives that were already sent out, those are the things that we're slowly starting to work on and get them knocked off the books so we can continue to move forward for other things that come up. But getting the tactical emails, the 5,000, 6,000 tactical emails that we get a day, we just can't handle everything. And so we just need some clarification and some guidance from council of council's goals that they want to see. And I think we've pretty much laid them out already, but keep the community safe and keep the economy going are two of them. And if you want to change those around, then change them around now so we can move forward.
Okay, so that list of objectives that went out to council here before Wednesday's meeting, and then I know the incident team, you're working on scratching off the ones that have already been completed.
Yes. And then
okay.
And then on the website, I think, Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, but those objectives will be on the website. Is that what the plan is? Eventually, the plan is to have those on the website, and as they start to get knocked off the list, or we're working on it, or we have a plan, or if we have a group or a branch or a task force, those will get starting to knock off. So by, a couple of weeks, we shouldn't have any real objectives going on. We should just be slowly working towards the end goal.
And that's part of your structure, that you have planning things kind of like weekly chunks. You put the objectives together, you get those objectives done that week, and then you move on to
something else. If we have the manpower to do something, we will do it. If we don't have the manpower, we'll have to look for another way of doing it, and it may get pushed off to the back burner because something more important came up. So we just need goals from the council to move forward.
Okay, council questions or comments, discussion? Councilman Baylor?
Mr. Mayor,
Go ahead.
Councilman Gleason?
I was just going to say, as far as inbound traffic into the harbor, that would be the Coast Guard would be another awesome asset because, unless they come, I guess, from the south, but most people come around Salmo Point and drive right by the cutter. So they could be helping, the incident management team for the harbor by reporting the inbound vessels. So.
Okay. And I think, so I think that's a good example. That's kind of jumping to a tactic and saying the Coast Guard's the solution, where an objective would be protect the harbor, because the Coast Guard is first responders, and frankly, even their air team is checking in with our incident management, making sure that they're quarantining properly and stuff as their helicopter comes in to be stationed here for the 5 months of summer. And that, of course, is an emergency medevac asset and everything. So there's a lot of detail that the incident team is working on a minute-to-minute basis. But so the objectives are get the harbor plan finished, or protect the harbor, and then that policy, and that's a priority for us. That's the good policy direction I think they're looking for. How they do that and the resources that are available are the kind of the tactical pieces. And then they'll come back if they say, wow, we've gone to the Coast Guard, we've gone everything. Maybe we need private security council. This is where we need your help. We need some resources.
That's exactly correct. Yeah, you say we want to protect the harbor. We have to figure out how to do it. And you can say protect the harbor, and the Coast Guard might be an asset. You could throw that out there. That's something we may not have thought of. And then we would research that. Okay, how do we fulfill this objective? Okay, yeah, the Coast Guard would be a good one to shut the harbor down or board the boats when they come in and do all that. So we run it through the chain of command, through the state and the federal level, to see if we can get that achieved. If it comes back and they say they can't do that, then we would go, okay, well, maybe we can get the state troopers there. We look at the different avenues and venues that we might have available to us, and we may not be able to address it. We may have to put local folks down there. It may work out differently than what the initial objective was, but the final end is we're going to be able to accomplish that objective or not.
Perfect. So thank you, Chief Hicks. So that way, Councilman Gleason, you can give the policy direction, but also make some tactical suggestions so that we can tap your experience as a commercial fisherman and local knowledge and stuff to make sure we're not missing something.
Yeah, Roger, and I guess where I'm coming from is in the absence of information regarding where you're going with stuff. I might inadvertently throw something out there like that, and I'm in no way trying to step on the management team's toes, but like when you have a specific thing that you're speaking about, and I've been on the water for 45 years, stuff just pops into my head because I have to deal with it, and so definitely not trying to step on toes. And I think in this type of a meeting, I think we're all safe to make suggestions. I'm hoping it's that way, anyways.
Sure, and no idea is a bad idea, and it's okay to throw an idea in there because, like I said, it might be something we didn't think about. Oh yeah, there's a resource we didn't even think about, and then we can pursue that resource. And if we come up empty, we come up empty, but it might be the perfect solution. So it's not bad to throw ideas out there. That's fine.
Yeah, it's just if you direct Helen to go form an agreement with the Coast Guard to be that solution, that starts tying up resources, if that makes sense. But the other thing is, Councilman Gleason, it isn't just, you've got 2,300 citizens that are giving you ideas and suggestions and feedback. So that's a way for the community to, another way for the community to contribute to the process through their policymakers and the community leadership. So, Councilman
Yeah,
Bailey.
Roger.
Oh, yeah.
We are, we're held accountable by the people that vote us into office. So I'm just going to throw that out there. They're the people that we're accountable to, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, and the unfortunate or difficult thing about it is that in the community, I get the extremes of ideas from you need to do it this way to on the other end, you need to do it that way. And I think I think we get to be the consensus builders. We get to find the solution that works rather than pursue solutions that polarize. So it's a difficult place to be, and I know all of you get it from all sides, as do all of us here.
I think I heard another councilman. Yes, and Councilman Sherman.
Thank you. So in the essence of time and beginning to satisfy what the IMT team needs from us, I've been working on some policies that I think, in my opinion and what I've heard from folks in the community, would be good guidelines and starting points. And I'm wondering, in terms of protocol, are we allowed to draft these up and maybe provide them to Susan or to Helen and have them as a starting point in discussion?
Yes, I would send them to Susan and copy Helen for distribution to council and mayor, and that way all of council can see them and be considering them before the next meeting. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Does that sound right, Helen and Susan?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Other council comments, suggestions?
Yeah, this is Melina.
Councilman Meyer.
I kind of got this idea after hearing Chief Hicks talk about how the Coast Guard and troopers, and they're kind of part of the state or federal line of their command, because they're also dealing with this emergency. And then Gleason kind of brought up the Coast Guard, and starting to wonder, is there, maybe we could reach out to some of these other entities that are part of state or federal command structure, just inviting them to send a representative or somebody to join our incident command team. So when you guys are working out these problems, maybe there is a representative from, say the Coast Guard or something, and then they hear you guys talking about harbor, and then they can jump in and say, hey, let me look up my chain of command to see if we can do this. So we're not having to just reach out and come up with these ideas and assuming they can or can't do this. Maybe they can be brought in part of the process. Not all of them might take up on it, but maybe that could be a way we can fill some more boxes or get them integrated with the incident command team early on in our summer, because this is going to be ongoing.
Okay, your incident commander can speak to that.
Yes, in the incident command structure, we have a liaison who has been in contact with all those stakeholder liaisons. So they are talking to each other, and we do have that communication.
I guess maybe I was thinking maybe just going a little further, that'd be like, and if you have people stationed here locally in Cordova, we're looking for more people on our team, because on a city level, we're going through all the resources we have, that having people that are already trained would really be an asset to us locally. I guess we can just kind of frame it that way to see if they can join our team and help us out locally a little bit more than the liaison, getting information back and forth, more integrated.
So correct me if I'm wrong. So tactically what would happen is if we have it, when we have a specific need to meet an objective, that's when we reach out as say, okay, we've got right now we're implementing, for example, enforcement of a mask ordinance. Now, as the team develops the enforcement and execution of that, it's like, okay, we don't have the resources, so here's 2 or 3 options, and they go through that. Chief Hicks?
We would send it up to the state level and ask them if they could provide that asset, and they would either say yes or no, keeping in mind they have their own jobs and duties to perform, especially in the summertime. We have, well, we're down to, or will be down to probably 1 trooper here by the summer. We're down to 2 right now. Their job is to enforce the fisheries laws and game and guide laws and stuff on the Sound. That's their job. So they would not have the resources most likely, realistically, to support us, because that's their job. And the same with the Forest Service. He's federal. His job is to protect the forest and do what he does. And he goes out on the Sound as well. They have their own jobs. We could ask for the resource. They could potentially send somebody down as a resource if they had it. Or they could say, we just don't have the resources to support your needs right now. But all we can do is ask, because they fall under a different jurisdiction.
I did want to share something on this level. I was involved in a meeting yesterday with state municipal managers of coastal communities, all of whom are concerned about the same issues that we have here in Cordova. And a state official did say that they felt that they were very close to having an agreement with the National Guard that they would come in and airlift people out when the medical facilities were not able to accommodate or handle a sick person with COVID. So that isn't yet official news, but it shows how the various state assets are being brought to bear in response to community concerns. So I just want to throw that out there, that the state is very aware of the needs of coastal communities who don't have the adequate medical facilities. How will they handle the incoming fleets and the potential of someone being ill? And they're saying, you know what, we've got a resource that we can bring to the table. So that will be finalized, I'm guessing, in the next week or so. But those are the sorts of things that are in play out there right now.
Chief Hicks?
That fits into the other side of the equation. I saw in the news the other night where the city of Anchorage, this is a situation where it didn't work. The city of Anchorage asked for the National Guard to support the city with the homeless camps up there, moving people around and getting, working on the homeless camps, and the state denied that assistance. So it depends on each situation, and they have to determine the validity of that. If we need a medical support team down here, and we've all of a sudden we've got several cases and we're overwhelmed, they would probably validate that, and they would probably give us support we need. Can't guarantee it, but there's a case of, like you say, in Anchorage where they said, we want this, and they said, no, you can't have that. So all we can do is ask.
So, and then Helen and I have trying to been divide and conquer as well, because we can't both be in the same place at the same time all the time. But there at 2 o'clock this afternoon, Governor Dunleavy's meeting with the mayors and Alaska Municipal League membership, and we pushed out the questions. Our 2 discussion items is one, enforcement of state and local mandates, and what resources the state was going to apply and what we would need to apply. And then the other is a marine highway system, because we're kind of hearing through back channels that, well, communities don't want the ferries to show up, and that's not why we're sending them. Well, that's not what we've been communicating. So the ferries now scheduled did not start until July 1st, and I think we would rather have it sooner if we can have it safely, and of course that's one of our ports of entry protocols, so that's another discussion item for that meeting. So other council questions or comments on the incident command structure or in general?
Mr. Mayor, this is Councilmember Schaefer.
Councilman Schaefer.
Yeah, I just have a quick question, Paul. Paul, can you clarify something that you said just a few minutes ago? You mentioned that you and your team were kind of in a holding pattern, waiting for goals from the city council. But I'm looking at this objectives list that you sent out, and you have a lot of objectives here. For example, establishing a plan to protect the harbor, or establishing a plan for protecting the elder and high-risk population in Cordova. So you're still working towards these objectives, but then waiting for higher level goals from the council?
Yeah, we still are working towards those objectives, but over the last couple weeks, it seemed like the community's goal more was to shut the fisheries down and close the community down. That changes our objectives and tactics. And so when that happens, we just kind of go into a holding pattern like we have been, more importantly, this last week, where we're just waiting for the will of the council to move forward. And so if that whole thing is kind of mellowed out a little bit, we can move forward with more of the objectives that are written down, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I would say, I think you've got really good objectives on this list, and if we are continuing with the fishing, we can't shut down the airport as we've found out and as we were learning last week, then I would hope that you guys are, still plugging away at these objectives.
We are plugging away at some of them. Like I said, we're still wondering what the will of the council is, and that's why we wanted to have this discussion today, so we could move forward, and get some goals from the council, so I could work on some objectives for those goals, and I can shoot them off to my team so they can create a tactic for those. But we do have those objectives, and we will continue to move forward with them. I know there's a couple things that really got knocked off the list, and we'll just keep plugging away. Before we end this conversation, I just want to ask the council that the best way to understand what the incident command structure looks like is to take a couple courses online at home over the weekend, and it's the incident command structure, ICS 100, 200, 700, and 800. And that kind of gives you a little more idea as to what we do on our team. And you can get those at FEMA.gov. And as actually part of the council, it's part of your role is to take those courses so you can understand them. So it's incident command structure 100, 200, 700, and 800. And some of them are like
Those are all free.
long.
They're an hour to 2 hours long. Councilman Baylor.
I think you just muddied the waters, Paul. I think council's objectives are right here. The objectives you gave us, we do agree on these objectives. So I was assuming you're going to be off and running with these. I don't think you're waiting for us to say do them. I think maybe you need to get concurrence from the council, but I assume that these are the goals you're going to go for, and you're working on them.
If that's what we want to do, yes. But like I said, when the community wanted to shut the fisheries down and they wanted to close the borders down, that changed a couple things. And once that happens, we just kind of sit back and go, okay, let's wait for the policy to go through so we can act on it.
So on this particular item, council, go ahead.
Oh, this is Councilman Schaefer. I guess last week we, in terms of policy, decided we weren't shutting the airport down. We had that discussion and it decided that wasn't an option for us.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, our next meeting is next Wednesday. Do you need goals from us so that you have more direction before next Wednesday?
No. So if you agree that the objectives that were sent out are okay, I'm going to continue to run with those objectives and get back to my team so we can really start knocking out a lot of things. But there are a few policies, one like the mask, the face covering thing. That's something that we want to push through council, through the city manager under 2020-2. That's something that we can push out right away and start implementing that.
So what I'm going to do is go back to the roll call because this is important, I think, for council to weigh in on. So I heard Councilman Baylor support the objectives that were presented. I think I just heard Councilman Schaefer. Is that correct? You support the objectives that the incident command brought forward?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, Councilman Meyer?
Yeah, I do too. And if I have anything to add to it, then I will definitely bring it up and send it to the manager.
Thank you. Councilman Allison?
Yeah, I agree too. Yep.
Okay, Councilman Sherman?
Yes, absolutely. So many of my goals would be the same that are listed here, and I'm very confused as to why thought you needed to stop when we resolved the fishing and the airport problems. And so I guess I'm saying full steam ahead, and we'll take this and look at it, and I have some I can add.
Thank you. Councilman Gleason?
Yeah, yes, on the objectives there, especially points of entry.
Okay, Councilman Guard?
Yeah, but I think we need to be clear when we talk about stuff. I mean, we talked about this a little bit before. When we talk about stuff at council, unless we specifically make a policy about it, there's been no change in policy. We've had lack of communication on all problems because everybody's been so swamped and overwhelmed by this. So it's no diss on anybody for it, but you're going to have stuff like this come up, and until an official policy is put down, there's no reason to veer off or change course to put on the brakes or do any of that. Once policy's set, unless it's officially changed or modified, it should just keep moving ahead.
Yeah, and I hear and understand what Paul is saying, and I also hear council's concern, and maybe having sat in on a lot of the meetings, maybe it just helps that I would characterize it more like they're running around the racetrack, you know, and they didn't stop running. It's just a mental pause. Are we still running towards the end? Are we still running towards the same finish line here? So
I understand, but unless we make a change in policy, it's no diss on anybody or anything. I know we're all overwhelmed by this.
I just wanted to be clear that they.
So we do.
Yeah.
Let's stick with the policy we got set.
Yeah, I just wanted to be clear. Nobody has slowed down in pursuing these objectives whatsoever in executing them. It's more of a mental pause. Are these still our objectives? If not, then we need to know now, because. Yeah.
And so just to clarify, our two main objectives are the public health and safety, and then economic growth or economics, moving forward. And so if those aren't the objectives, then I need to know that. So if that's what the council's will, and the public safety is number one and economics is number two, then we'll just keep moving forward.
Okay.
And can I ask one other question that I've been trying to ask, or I can hold it off till later, but it kind of had to do with policy stuff a little bit and not confusing the water.
Councilman Garden.
So if we want to talk about setting policies, because we don't want to take that down through the weeds to make things harder for anybody or do that, but so that the public can understand it, we can talk about examples of different things that could accomplish this policy without stepping on toes or doing any of that or confusing the incident command team at all, right?
I'm not sure I understand.
We're at a council meeting and we say we want to make policy X, and then just saying we want to make policy X doesn't kind of really say what's going to go on. So you could say examples, you could do this or this or this or this to attain that goal of that policy, but that's all to be decided by the incident command team. We could do stuff like that at the council meetings and we wouldn't confuse anything.
We may just have to see how this plays out. I think each.
All I'm trying to do is make it clear to the public, because a big part of what's driven this stuff are public fears from lack of information, be it from council or the incident command team or whatever. But the stuff last week about, the push to close down the fisheries or push down to close down the airport or whatever.
Good.
So if we can have clearer, easier to understand stuff go on at council when we talk about policies without trying to shove anything down the incident command system's throat and do any of their job or stay off their toes.
No, I think it's working the way you've been doing it. Councilman Baylor.
Yeah, could I ask the mayor to get concurrence or acknowledge concurrence for the record that the council supports the objectives to ensure health and safety of the community and promote economical stability that was presented to us? I believe we did have concurrence for the record.
Yeah.
I would like to add one to that.
Councilman.
I guess I didn't really talk about the comment about health and safety, and then economic second. I would like subsistence to be between economic and health and safety, just as a side note, but I would like that to be number 2.
I'm not sure I understood. Could you repeat that?
Subsistence,
I'm sorry?
I think is subsistence. I think to be the second objective. I think it's really important for us to think about subsistence food. A lot of people in Cordova do subsisting, so I would like that to be the second objective above economic.
Okay, so we can park that for the special meeting next week because we're in a work session. So I'm trying to be careful here. Concurrence was something you already had in the last meeting, but if we start changing or taking action, that might be for another meeting, and we're almost up on 2 hours. Would that be okay, Councilman Meyer?
Yeah, that's fine. I just Taylor asked for concurrence on that, and I just wanted to make.
Okay. Okay, yeah, I think we captured it and parked it. So is there any, let me do it this way, is there any council objection that all the objectives, that long list of objectives that were supplied to you were specifically to meet, those sub-objectives were specifically to meet the primary objective of protecting life safety, public safety in Cordova, and the second objective in that order is economic stability. So is there any dissension or disagreement with that at this point? Okay, that's where your incident command team is working on. And then just remember, this is just the emergency, the COVID-19 response. So any other objectives have to be pointed directly towards that. And subsistence can absolutely, food security can actually be an element of public safety. But those high level policy objectives need to be very focused on the incident, which is the virus response. Okay, Council, is there any other questions on the incident command structure or your policy role in it?
This is Melina.
Councilman Meyer.
I guess I just wanted to kind of do a statement because I heard a lot about shutting down the fishery and people wanting to shut down the airport, shut down the fishery. And I necessarily wasn't going to bring this up, but it has been stated a couple times here. And I hadn't heard from a single person that was the main objection to shutting down the airport. And for the airport, thought was that there was a lot of people that were concerned that there wasn't airport screening happening, the harbor wasn't happening, and understood that plans were in the works, but it wasn't happening yet. So to buy time was to shut down our port of entry, which our main one was airport at this time. So I think that there's a lot of misconception going around that it's against fishery, and I know there's implications to shutting down the airport, but I hadn't heard from a single person from all the phone calls that I had. Maybe a couple emails did, and then they were like, well, I didn't mean shut it down. I just mean we need to protect our town and shut down the airport. So I just heard a lot about shutting down the fishery, and I don't want anyone to think that this town is anti-fishing industry, but right now we're dealing with a pandemic. So thinking about shutting down our ports of entry is a very legitimate concern and thing to come up. It shouldn't halt all other objectives, but health and safety is the #1 priority. And so we need to look at all those options. Whether we actually pass them and go through, that's another story, but we should be prepared and consider all options necessary for this pandemic. So I don't want it to be this dividing issue, and it kind of has turned into for and against fishery, but this is for health, safety. That's all it is. Both sides are about health and safety, and that's what we're trying to do, move forward. We can't shut down our airport at the time, but we need to have these things and be ready to do them if we need to, because we have to protect the health and safety of this community and everybody entering in and everyone that's been here. So I just wasn't going to mention that too much, but I think that there is this misconception about against fishery, and it's not about that. It's about a pandemic, and it's very concerning to people, and it should be for all of us.
Thank you, and I think that is a very important distinction. Councilman Sherman.
Thank you. I wanted to just echo on to Melina's comment. I've been really, really happy this week to see the harbor working document come out. It's been useful. We're getting great feedback on it, and I'm pleased as punch to see that. I understand why the ferry plan is put on hold, but I'm desperately now looking for an airport plan, and I'm hoping that that will be released soon as well. And I guess I'd like to ask about its status.
The airport plan is being written as we speak. I don't have a time frame on when that's going to be pushed out. But right now, there are people out there doing the work. There is people under the branches and the group supervisors, and that's actively working right now.
Thank you, Paul.
I just wanted to echo Councilman Meyer's comments, and again, this is where some of the public relations training is helping me. I can't interchangeably use choke down the airport, close the airport, restrict the airport. Those are three completely different terms, and the public's so sensitive to them. So if I'm thinking put more, tighter restrictions in place, but I say close it, that's, yeah. So that's why I clarified on today's radio slot for the community what the real goal is, which is to protect life safety and put more aggressive restrictions in place if they're necessary. Finish plans, so forth. Other council comments or questions?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Gleason.
Yeah, I was just going to say, subsistence is actually open and unrestricted. They've already made that a rule. So I don't know that we would need to classify it. It's open and unrestricted under the health mandates, and you can't actually find that on the state's website. I noticed that one, I don't know, about 4 or 5 days ago. The Sportfish one came out after.
Thank you, Councilman Gleason. That's actually a good, just for council's benefit and for the public record and anybody watching, if there's any questions, public questions regarding the state mandates or actions on COVID items, those can go to covidquestions@alaska.gov. For instance, for the recent sport fishing and subsistence mandate. Any questions on local mandates and actions should continue to go to cordovaprepared@yahoo.com. Further council comments, and I'm going to try to wrap up here in 3 minutes so we can get on to our next meetings. Let me go through the list. Councilman Gleason.
Yeah, that was it.
Thank you. Councilman Baylor.
No comment.
Councilman Meyer.
No comment.
Councilman Garden.
No comment. Thank you.
Councilman Schaefer.
No comment. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Councilman Sherman.
Nothing more right now. Thank you.
Okay, we have one item left on the agenda.
Move to adjourn.
Do I have a second? We have a motion and a second. I'll pause a minute. Is there any objection? Okay, we're adjourned.